I'm here. I could hear the whole thing. And I
Okay, we
responded to
couldn't
you,
hear.
but you know what?
We couldn't hear.
Now I'm here.
That's what I get for being snarky to you about actually being
I
early,
know.
but now you're perfectly on time. We had something behind the scenes going screwy. But I'll just repeat. So, little tense in the ninth inning. You see Aroldis Chapman. I don't think anybody who was watching the first couple innings of the game and then decided to turn back in to see what was going on would expect that. What was it like in the building, and what are your takeaways from where the rotation and the pitching staff overall stand right now?
Yeah, the first time you asked this question, I responded just to myself. I said everybody was too drunk to be tense at that point.
Okay.
But now that I've said the joke twice, it kind of lost its luster.
It's always better
the
second time.
No, that's not true.
Or when you have to explain it.
Exactly. I think, the core always talks about that moments like that are what can lose you a series down the line. Aroldis Chapman coming in today means that, he might not be available tomorrow, or if he pitches tomorrow, then he's not available Sunday, and now you have to look at, someone else in the ninth, and that's how, one game can lead into another. He's talked a lot of times about getting another team's closer in a, quote-unquote meaningless situation to enter the game, and that's what caused them to win the next day. So these things are all kind of interrelated. So I think you could see it have an effect. They did have to use a lot of relievers today. In a stretch where they're playing a lot of games. They had an off day on Tuesday, but 2 straight in Baltimore, 2 straight day games. They're going to have a stretch here without an off day, including the road trip next week to Chicago and Tampa. So I think that could be it. I think generally the bullpen's been really, really good to start this season. Guys are throwing the ball well. Chapman obviously has. Criswell ran into some trouble today in mop-up duty, but I think they're going to be pleased with the bullpen. I think the bigger story pitching-wise today on a day when the offense was everything is Walker Buehler and his struggles continuing, and I think that's something to monitor for sure.
Chris, I want to follow up on that because this is a Red Sox team that had 57 quality starts last year. That was 15th in the majors. They only had 47 the year before that. 2 so far this season. Obviously, we had the dominant Crochet performance in Baltimore earlier this week, but it feels like they're still searching for that second guy and third guy behind Crochet. Buehler has struggled his first 2 times out. Do you think this is a case of Buehler just struggling initially? Are you concerned that this is the Buehler that we saw last year when he first came back that didn't look like the same guy that had been dominant before?
Yeah, I think the rotation outside of Crochet might be the biggest concern with the team. I think the defense has improved. I think the bullpen has been pretty good so far, and obviously we've seen what the lineup has done over the last 3 days or so. But if you look at it, you're counting on Crochet to be lights out every 5th day. We saw that in Baltimore. Behind him, Houck has not been super sharp. He was horrendous in spring training, and I think, there is an expectation that, they have to be a little careful with him after career high in innings and workload last year. Buehler has been what he's been, and then you have, Newcomb's not going to be long for the rotation, and obviously, Richard Fitz is going to be a guy who goes up and down. But if you look at it with Houck and Buehler, Houck okay, Buehler bad, Giolito and Bayo, you don't know what you're going to get out of Giolito. Complete unknown after being out for so long. Bayo, I think the expectations are high, but, you never know. The expectations have been high for a while. And Crawford, nowhere close to joining the rotation with injury. I think there is concern past Crochet. And I think, the way he pitched the other night, signing the extension, getting that ace kind of covered up the rest of these things. But they need Buehler to be good. They need Houck to be good. They need someone else to step up. And, especially when they're down, 3 guys of the top 6 right now.
Chris Cotillo of Mass Live, that's who we're speaking with right now. You mentioned Garrett Crochet getting that $170 million extension. Incredible that they were able to do that when he said he wasn't going to negotiate in season. We never see that happen. Chris Cotillo, how often are we going to continue to hear guys say they're not going to negotiate in season, they're not looking at talking about their terms once the season starts, and then miraculously these deals get done?
Yeah, the great Chris Mason of Mass Live, I believe, tweeted the other day saying, I'm not going to negotiate in season, ... unless the offer's really good, which I thought was a good way to put it. Obviously, once they hit a number, they were willing to. He was willing to engage. And to me, that's, I think, kind of tells the story. Alex Cora was willing to engage in the middle of the season last year about a deal, and we've seen this time and time again. I think the onus is somewhat on the reporters here for falling for that and thinking the opening day deadline was an opening day deadline. But, talking to Crochet 10 days before the end of camp, his comments on play Tessie, like different things that his comments with, hate to give him credit, but Bradford at one point, like this was far off, very far off at a point, 10 days before spring training. They closed the gap enough in the last few days before opening day to get him to push that deadline, and they got it across the finish line. I think at the end of the day, both sides wanted this bad. I think the Red Sox gave him a little more money than I would have thought originally, but I think it's a great outcome for all parties.
What do you think maybe changed there for the Red Sox to move more towards the direction that he and his camp were in? And is there anything that we can read into about not just, I mean, that's the big deal, but about the Christian Campbell deal and being able to get that done and not drag a young player into arbitration in the future or anything like that? Is this, it's a long way of me asking, is ownership taking a turn, looking at things differently now in a real way than they have been over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Crochet, it's like, you had to pay up twice, where you have to obviously give up those 4 prospects to get him. Once you're kind of in that deep with him, like you have to think about, well, we got to make this worth our while to not have him just for 2 years for all the talent we gave up. I think the Campbell deal is a total separate type of thing. I think they'd offer that extension to any prospect that would come up. I'm sure they have offered that deal or something similar to like Casas and maybe Duran and probably Bayo, all these guys that have come up. And if they say yes, it's all upside and no downside for the team. Even when Campbell's making $20 million a year at the end of that contract, CBT-wise, which is all that matters, it's only going to be 7.5 against the tax. I mean, even if he's been DFA'd for 8 years at that point, which is not going to happen, that's easy for them to swallow. So those types of deals are never, ever bad for the team. They're always, I think, risky for the player more than anything. And we've seen that kind of, bear out with, how some of these deals have already aged. Rafaela's deal doesn't look amazing, but it's going to be okay because it's so, pennies on a dollar compared to some of these big-time deals that eventually get done.
Chris, we've seen, as you mentioned, the Crochet contract, obviously the Campbell contract in the first week of the season. You said that Campbell deal is something they would offer to essentially all their young, up-and-coming potential stars. Do you feel there is one or two of these other young players that you could see reaching an extension at any point in the near future?
Yeah, I don't think so. I just don't think Roman Anthony and Marcelo Mayer are in the same boat. My take with the Campbell thing was always like he basically turned one really good minor league season into $60 million, right? He was not a top prospect a year ago. He was in high A year ago. All of a sudden, I mean, it was a quick turnaround. With a blue-chip guy like Anthony, with a blue-chip guy like Mayer, I think it's probably a tougher sell with them. I know they've tried and talked to other guys. They're not going to come up with anything with Casas. Duran's not a guy they've really looked to extend. So I think most likely they're done for now, but this will continue for years to come.
Chris Cotillo of Mass Live. So Tuesday, April 8th, we're supposed to get this Netflix series that was filmed for the majority of the last season, although as someone who was around the park a decent amount, not as much as you are, but they're in the WEEI studios over there, that crew did vanish for the most part, like well before the All-Star break. Have you heard anything about what might be in that documentary, and if there's anything there that could surprise people who watched the team pretty closely last season?
Yeah, I mean, this is not going to be the story of the 2024 Red Sox front to back and the developments of an 81-81 team. The goal, I think, is for the director, the producers, everybody who put so much time into this to tell the story of a major league season through the characters that emerge, throughout. We've seen some of the teasers, a lot of Tristan Casas, a lot of Jarren Duran. I think it's, they were looking for guys that were able to cooperate and tell their stories. And from, the expectation is it's going to be more story and character based than kind of telling the entire front to back 162, which, like, as someone who lived it, was a pretty boring 162. So, obviously, I think everybody's take originally is, well, it would be more interesting if they were really good or even really bad. Like, this would be great if they chronicled, like, the White Sox last year or the Dodgers, whatever. But it's really kind of separate of how the team, performs. It's really more about kind of the characters that emerge, the storylines, the conflicts, that type of stuff. And I think, it's a lot of probably off the field stuff they get into as well.
Is it a lot of Chris Cotillo?
Not enough, no.
All right, did you sit down for any interviews?
I did not. No, I was not. They used a lot of Sean McAdam on the Mass Live side, so there's some would say too much.
That's a good move. Maybe you'll be in the 2025 version.
His institutional knowledge carries the day.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Chris Cotillo, Mass Live Red Sox beat writer, thanks so much for joining us. If you want to follow him, you can follow him at Chris Cotillo on Twitter. Are you on the Blue Sky? Are you a Blue Sky guy?
I am not.
Okay,
no,
so
not
we don't
yet.
have to give that out anymore. You want to
No,
promote
I've
your
gotten
Instagram
or
anything?
I do not. I got a couple of angry emails from people that wanted me to go on Blue Sky, and I've not gotten around to it.
The people want more Chris Cotillo.
I don't think that's true, but we'll see. We'll see where the night takes us.
All right. Thank you so much.